Greetings all, and welcome back to a new episode. I know many of you use these videos to help you sleep, so before we begin, I thought it would be fun for everyone to say hello and leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from. Your engagement really makes this channel special. And hey, if you enjoy getting your nightly dose of thrills and chills with us, why not hit that subscribe button below? It's the best way to never miss out on the latest terrifying tales. So kick back, relax, and let's get started. The afternoon sun streamed through the living room windows, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor. I was alone in the house, a sprawling old place filled with creaking floorboards and echoing hallways. My parents had gone out of town, leaving me in charge of their sprawling property and their beloved golden retriever, Max. The silence of the house was suddenly shattered by a metallic clang. I jolted upright from the couch, my heart pounding in my chest. It sounded like it came from the backyard. Max, who had been dozing at my feet, lifted his head, his ears perked up. I cautiously made my way to the window and peered outside. The source of the noise was clear. The shed door was ajar, swaying slightly in the breeze. A cold dread settled over me. I was sure I had locked it earlier. Max whined softly beside me, sensing my unease. I grabbed his leash, a surge of adrenaline giving me a false sense of courage. "Come on, boy," I whispered. "Let's go check it out." We crept across the yard, the late afternoon sun casting an eerie glow on everything. As we approached the shed, a sense of foreboding washed over me. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Max nudged my hand with his wet nose, a silent plea to turn back. But I was too far gone, curiosity and fear battling for dominance within me. I reached for the shed door, my hand trembling slightly. The interior of the shed was shrouded in darkness. I fumbled for the light switch, my fingers brushing against something cold and metallic. A shiver ran down my spine. I flipped the switch, and the shed was illuminated in a harsh, fluorescent light. The shed was empty, except for the usual gardening tools and lawn equipment. I scanned the room, my eyes darting from one corner to the other. Nothing seemed out of place. I let out a sigh of relief, my tense muscles relaxing slightly. Maybe it was just the wind that opened the door, I thought, trying to reassure myself. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something strange. There were footprints in the dirt floor of the shed, small, bare footprints. They seemed to have appeared out of nowhere, leading from the back of the shed towards the door. My blood ran cold. I spun around, my eyes wide with terror. Max let out a low growl, his fur standing on end. We weren't alone. I grabbed Max's leash and bolted out of the shed, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the heavy footsteps of someone, or something, following close behind. I raced towards the house, my legs pumping furiously. I could feel the hot breath of my pursuer on the back of my neck. I fumbled with the doorknob, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Finally, the door swung open, and I stumbled inside, slamming it shut behind me. I leaned against the door, gasping for air, my heart pounding in my chest. Max barked frantically, his teeth bared. I could hear the muffled sounds of someone trying to open the door from the outside. I knew I had to find a way to protect myself and Max. I grabbed a baseball bat from the hall closet and crept through the house, my senses on high alert. I heard a loud crash from the living room. I turned the corner, my bat raised, ready to strike. But the room was empty, except for a broken window. I cautiously approached the window, peering out into the darkness. A figure was silhouetted against the moonlight, their face obscured by shadow. They raised their hand, revealing a gleaming knife. I gasped, my grip tightening on the bat. The figure lunged towards me, their eyes burning with malice. I swung the bat with all my might, connecting with their head. They stumbled backwards, their knife clattering to the floor. I didn't wait to see if they were still alive. I grabbed Max's leash and ran out of the house, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't stop running until I reached the safety of the neighbor's house. The police arrived a short time later, but they found no trace of the intruder. The only evidence was the broken window and the footprints in the shed. I never went back to that house. The memory of that night haunts me to this day. I still see the figure in my nightmares, their eyes burning with hatred. I know I'll never forget the terror I felt that night, the feeling of being hunted by something unknown. The old grandfather clock in the hallway chimed midnight, its echoing gong reverberating through the empty house. I was home alone, nestled under a blanket on the living room couch, engrossed in a classic horror movie on TV. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, sending a chill down my spine. The power flickered momentarily, plunging the room into darkness. I instinctively reached for my phone, its screen casting an eerie glow across my face. The silence was broken by a creaking sound from upstairs. My heart skipped a beat. I strained my ears, listening intently. The creaking continued, followed by the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps. My mind raced, conjuring up images of masked intruders and lurking shadows. I clutched my phone tighter, my thumb hovering over the emergency call button. I crept towards the stairs, my bare feet padding silently across the carpet. The footsteps grew louder, closer. I froze, my breath held in my chest. A figure emerged from the darkness at the top of the stairs. It was tall and gaunt, its face obscured by shadow. I could just make out the glint of its eyes, cold and menacing. I stumbled backwards, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure descended the stairs, its movements unnaturally fluid. I could feel its gaze burning into me, a chilling sensation that sent shivers down my spine. I turned and ran, my legs pumping furiously. I could hear the figure's footsteps close behind me, gaining with every stride. I reached the front door, fumbling with the lock in my panic. The door swung open, and I stumbled out onto the porch, slamming it shut behind me. I could hear the figure pounding on the door, its rage echoing through the night. I raced across the lawn, my bare feet pounding against the cold, wet grass. I could hear the figure's cries growing fainter, but I didn't dare slow down. I reached the neighbor's house and pounded on the door, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The door opened, revealing the startled face of Mrs. Henderson, my elderly neighbor. I stumbled inside, my legs giving out beneath me. I collapsed onto the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Mrs. Henderson wrapped her arms around me, murmuring words of comfort. The police arrived a short time later, but they found no sign of the intruder. The only evidence was the footprints in the dew-soaked grass, leading back to my house. I never went back to that house. The memory of that night haunts me to this day. I still see the figure in my nightmares, its eyes burning with malice. I know I'll never forget the terror I felt that night, the feeling of being hunted by something unknown. The digital clock on my bedside table blinked 11:11 p.m., the numbers glowing ominously in the otherwise darkened room. I was alone in the sprawling Victorian house, an inheritance from my eccentric great-aunt. It was an imposing structure, filled with labyrinthine corridors, dusty antiques, and an oppressive silence that seemed to amplify every creak and groan of the old wood. The wind howled outside, shaking the windows and sending shadows dancing across the walls. A sudden chill swept through the room, and I pulled the covers closer around me, trying to ignore the prickling sensation at the back of my neck. I had been warned about the house's strange occurrences, the whispers in the night, the unexplained cold spots, the feeling of being watched. But I had dismissed them as mere superstitions, remnants of an overactive imagination fueled by the house's eerie atmosphere. But as I lay in bed, my senses on high alert, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I heard a faint scratching sound, like fingernails on wood, coming from the far corner of the room. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. The scratching continued, growing louder, more insistent. I reached for the bedside lamp, my hand trembling. The light revealed nothing but the empty corner, the shadows retreating back into the darkness. I let out a shaky breath, telling myself it was just my nerves. But the scratching resumed, this time accompanied by a low, guttural growl. I froze, my blood running cold. A sense of dread washed over me, a primal fear that something evil lurked in the shadows. I scrambled out of bed, my bare feet hitting the cold floor. I fumbled for the doorknob, my fingers slipping on the smooth metal. The growling intensified, as if the creature sensed my desperation. The door finally swung open, and I bolted out into the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the creature's heavy footsteps behind me, its hot breath on the back of my neck. I raced down the hallway, my eyes darting from side to side, searching for an escape. The house seemed to close in around me, its endless corridors and twisting staircases becoming a labyrinth of terror. I stumbled into a room, slamming the door shut behind me. I leaned against it, gasping for air, my heart pounding in my ears. The room was pitch black, the only light coming from the faint glow of the moon filtering through the window. I fumbled along the wall, searching for a light switch. My fingers brushed against something cold and smooth. I gasped, recoiling in horror. It was a human hand, cold and lifeless. I screamed, my voice echoing through the empty house. I turned and ran, blindly, desperately, through the darkness. I burst out of the room, my lungs burning, my legs trembling. I raced down the hallway, my eyes wide with terror. I could hear the creature's footsteps behind me, closing in. I could feel its presence, a suffocating darkness that threatened to consume me. I reached the end of the hallway, my only escape a window overlooking the backyard. I threw it open and climbed out onto the ledge, my heart pounding in my chest. I looked down at the ground below, a dizzying drop, but it was my only chance. I took a deep breath and jumped. I landed hard, the impact sending a jolt of pain through my body. I lay there for a moment, gasping for air, my limbs aching. I slowly got to my feet, my eyes scanning the darkness. There was no sign of the creature. I limped away from the house, my heart still pounding in my chest. I didn't look back, afraid of what I might see. I never went back to that house. The memory of that night haunts me to this day. I still see the creature in my nightmares, its eyes burning with malice. I know I'll never forget the terror I felt that night, the feeling of being hunted by something unknown. The sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving the house shrouded in an eerie twilight. My parents were away on a business trip, leaving me alone with only the company of our aging tabby cat, Whiskers. I had always enjoyed my solitude, but tonight, an unsettling feeling gnawed at me, a prickling sensation that something wasn't quite right. The house, a sprawling ranch style nestled in the woods, felt different tonight. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind outside, sent shivers down my spine. I tried to distract myself with a book, but the words danced before my eyes, my concentration shattered by an incessant, rhythmic tapping. It was coming from the attic, a slow, deliberate tapping that seemed to echo through the very bones of the house. I cautiously climbed the creaky attic ladder, my heart pounding in my chest. The air was thick with dust and the scent of decay, and an oppressive silence hung heavy in the air. I reached for the light switch, but nothing happened. The only illumination came from the dim glow of the moon filtering through the dusty windows. I took a hesitant step forward, my eyes adjusting to the darkness. A sudden gust of wind slammed the attic door shut, plunging me into complete darkness. A wave of panic washed over me, and I fumbled for my phone, its screen casting an eerie glow across my face. I heard it then, a low, guttural growl emanating from the shadows. My blood ran cold. I spun around, my eyes wide with terror, but I could see nothing in the inky blackness. The growling grew louder, closer. I could feel hot breath on my neck, the hairs on my arms standing on end. I stumbled backwards, my hand brushing against something cold and rough. It was a wooden ladder, leading up to a small, dark loft. I scrambled up the ladder, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the creature below me, its claws scraping against the wooden floorboards. I reached the top of the ladder and found myself in a cramped, dusty space. Cobwebs clung to my face, and I could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching me from the darkness. I pressed myself against the wall, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The creature was below me, its growls echoing through the attic. I knew I couldn't stay here, but there was nowhere else to go. I closed my eyes, my mind racing, desperate for a plan. And then I remembered the old skylight, a forgotten relic from a bygone era. With renewed determination, I crawled towards the skylight, my fingers searching for the latch. The growling intensified, and I could feel the creature's hot breath on my ankles. My fingers finally found the latch, and I pushed upwards with all my might. The skylight creaked open, revealing a sliver of moonlight. I scrambled onto the roof, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the creature's frustrated snarls from below, its claws scraping against the shingles. I didn't look back. I crawled across the roof, my hands gripping the rough tiles, my eyes fixed on the distant glow of the neighbor's house. I reached the edge of the roof and jumped, landing with a thud on the soft grass below. I didn't stop running until I reached the safety of the neighbor's porch. I pounded on the door, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The door opened, revealing the startled face of Mr. Jenkins, my kindly old neighbor. I collapsed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Mr. Jenkins called the police, but they found no trace of the creature. The only evidence was the scratched floorboards in the attic and the lingering scent of decay. I never went back to that house. The memory of that night haunts me to this day. I still see the creature in my nightmares, its eyes burning with malice. I know I'll never forget the terror I felt that night, the feeling of being hunted by something unknown.